thank you to Allison and Foresight. This is my second year getting a chance to speak here. I think you grouped this really well. Victor, that was a great presentation. Space sneakers, yes, I think that was a great example. But everything you talked about, the collaboration, same thing goes for what I want to talk about, which is making whiskey in space. And I want to start with a quote from American author William Faulkner, who said, "Civilization begins with distillation." Now, I like that quote. I used it. I double-checked. No one's proven that it's wrong to attribute it to William Faulkner, so I'm just going to keep saying it is. It's one of my favorite whiskey quotes, alongside Mark Twain. Too much of anything is bad. Too much good whiskey is not enough. So we want to talk about making more good whiskey. And so I want to go back to this Faulkner quote. Civilization begins with distillation. And he's not entirely wrong. Quick Google search, again, iffy on whether the facts are completely true. You can date back distillation of alcohol to China, 800 BC, to Rome, 100 AD, and to Arabia in 800 AD. Great civilizations distill liquors and alcohol. So when are we going to get to that in space? Space 1999? No, we haven't really gotten there yet. Space 2001? No, haven't made distilled spirits there yet. Did we make it in 2010? No, not yet. So when are we going to get to it in space? Because again, if our goal is to talk about having the foresight to what humanity in space will look like, civilization in space, obviously, by this precedent that I've set, means we'll have to figure out how to distill in space. Why am I interested in talking about civilization in space? As our introduction said, my colleague Chris Hersey and I co-founded the Space Court Foundation. We are talking about the future of adjudicating laws in space. Our organization has put out a cartoon show about a future space court adjudicating a future space case called Stellar Decisis. We did a comedy variety show about space law and space activities. You can find that on our YouTube channel. And then I didn't mention it in my introduction, I apologize. I was also a Foresight Fellow and have previously given talks at Foresight, including on what I call the cosmology of space law. So again, we want civilization in space, and that provides us with a lot of challenges to get there in broad symbolic terms, or specifically to whiskey. What are the challenges we face in making whiskey in space? First of all, the launch costs of getting the ingredients and the machinery up there, because before we have the capability already in space, we have to put it up there. Like I said, when are we going to have that capability in space, the ability to grow crops and to manufacture those parts in the first instance in the space environment? We also need the science. I am not an engineer, and there are plenty of engineers here to tell me, and I've already met some of them, including Zara at Ambrosia, about how to work with biomaterials in space. So we need to figure out that design for use in microgravity. And then I am a lawyer, so I'm concerned about what are the legal implications of making whiskey in space, the authorization for the activity, but also the trade jurisdiction. So again, fifth time I'll say this, I am a lawyer, so these are the kinds of facts that I find fun. Bourbon, as an example, is defined as a distinct product of the United States and must be made in the US. This applies similarly to other national spirits around the world. Tequila in Mexico, Scotch in Scotland, soju in South Korea. Lots of, again, civilizations, national identities have distinctive spirits. The other fun fact, the Outer Space Treaty recognizes continuing jurisdiction over space objects by the launching state, meaning that on the International Space Station, the modules that the US launched up there extend US jurisdiction. And in fact, Congress made sure to cover any gaps. They've also extended patent protection to outer space. So any inventions that are made in outer space will fall under US jurisdiction. So when I put these two facts together, my question is, would a whiskey made on a US module count as bourbon? Would it count as being made in the US? Could you label it? Could you trade it in commerce under the label of bourbon. This is the legal challenge among the many others. So, as I said, do we have whiskey in space yet? Is any of this actually practical? No, this is not practical as of this year, not yet. First instance, it's obviously expensive to make. Anything involving space right now, getting it up to space, bringing it back down, it's all very, very expensive for some of the reasons we've already listed. Right now, it tastes really bad. Ardbeg Distillery from Scotland sent up some samples to the International Space Station around like 2011. Again, because it's so expensive, they didn't ship up an actual barrel full of whiskey. They sent up a little vial of whiskey and they put wood fragments inside of it to simulate the aging process. They kept a sample on Earth, they brought it back and they tasted it. And the tasting notes for the one in space included antiseptic lozenges and rubbery smoke. So right now, it just really doesn't taste good under current processes. And there have been other experiments, promotional stunts to do it. There have been companies who have proposed sending whiskey up to space, bringing it back and selling it for $75,000 a bottle. That's just not accessible to the average consumer. So why is it worth doing if it's not practical? Because the challenges are worth facing. I don't think anybody participating in this workshop wants to shy away from the challenges of doing anything in space. And the other thing is because working on these challenges will help engage the public. And that's what we need. We need public participation in order to achieve a future of humanity in space. So how do we take this beyond a thought experiment? I have a solution. I have trademarked the brand Space Age Bourbon for a couple of reasons. One, this is a brand that promotes thinking about futures in space. Again, we want to engage the public in this. It's a commercial product that, for right now, yes, will be made on Earth, contract distilling, white labeling. There are like 5 major whiskey producers in America, but there are hundreds of brands. So it's not unheard of to start with contract distilling to promote your brand. But more importantly is that by selling a commercial product and engaging the consumer on a broad level, you can start A, getting them to think about it, and B, you can invest those profits into the grants, the experiments, the developments you will need in order to achieve distilling whiskey in space. I just want to conclude with one more quote. Whiskey making is an act of cooperation between the blessings of nature and the wisdom of man. This is from Masataka Takatsuru, founder of Nikka Whiskey in Japan. This is the challenge we face. This is the promise of overcoming this challenge for us. So I believe I made time. Yep. So thank you all very much.
Thanks. Okay, we have time for a question, comment, requests. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that to call it bourbon, it has to be made in the US. If you were to make it on a US-owned space station, would you still be able to call it bourbon? Would it count as being made on US territory?
That is the question posed by putting those two fun facts together. And there are ways to test that before getting there eventually. You can put it before the government's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, I think, are responsible for these labeling decisions. And you can get them to say, like, yes, if you did this, you could label it this way. And then all of a sudden you have legal precedent. Again, facing this challenge will provide us so many new precedents to push commercialization and humanity and civilization into space. Can I take one more? James.
Why not put it still on a ship in international waters with a U.S. flagged vessel as a test case? It seems to me that the question here is a U.S. flagged vessel in transnational space, U.S. territory, that could be tested out on a ship.
So Jefferson, the Jefferson Whiskey Company has an aged at sea barrel, but again, the maritime law is going to have differences with space law. Jurisdiction of the sea is going to be different in some ways from jurisdiction in space, but with that precedent, they have to label it as aged at sea. So if you look really closely at these labels, they have these little distinctions to be like, it's blended bourbon, it's not pure bourbon, or it's bourbon aged at sea. Like they have all these qualifiers.
All right. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thank you, Alison.